Welcome everyone to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. It is a great pleasure to be joined today by the head of IDSF Research, Or Yissachar. Or, thank you so much for coming back to the briefing.
Thank you, Moshe. Good to be with you.
Or, you're no stranger of these briefings. You're in fact a fan favorite, so it's great to have you here. We always learn so much from you. And I want to start with something that is very timely. The Pope just died. Pope Francis died, and he, on his deathbed almost, called again for a ceasefire, for truce, for releasing the hostages. And these things are all obviously, we all want this, but it's the question of framing and who is to blame and what the priorities are and at what cost. And when you take a look at the news, again, you see Israeli teams and US teams talking about negotiations and ceasefires. And it almost seems like we're just in a broken record where we're trying
Mm.
the same thing over and over. Ceasefire, ceasefire, make a deal, wash and repeat. It doesn't work. Let's try it again. And I'm curious, are we going to be talking about ceasefires and hostage deals in 25 years from now? Is something going to change? Has Israel learned a lesson? What can you share with us?
Look, first I'll say that if there's anything we learned from October 7 is that you got to break the cycle, the ongoing cycle of rounds of conflicts with Gaza, ceasefires, and then on again. And I like recipes that work, to be honest. I don't like recipes that keep on failing. So let's distinguish for a second ideal and real. What's ideal, yeah, we'll sort of figure our way out in Gaza and try to avoid the reality. But what's real is that we have no other choice but to win this war. It's not mutually exclusive. I keep hearing people say that bringing back the hostages and defeating Hamas are diametrically opposed objectives. I don't buy that for a second. I think that keeping on saying it may bring these objectives further away, but I don't think so at all. In fact, Hamas brought back over 100 hostages within a week at the beginning of the war, just because of the military pressure, and Israel showed how dead serious it was to bring those back. And it really reminds me of, the Biden administration's, negotiations tactic with Iran, sort of agreeing to everything in advance, laying all the cards on the table, and ending up unfreezing $6 billion for 6 hostages and all these things. And Trump somehow comes in and with a fist on the table brings back hostages from all over the world, including from Russia, for some sort of an under the table kind of understanding, eye to eye. So that's how I see it. I'll just say, since we're at the beginning of the briefing, that I'm so glad to be joined because I just came back from the US. I know the Jewish War Veterans of America Museum invited me to talk to them. They couldn't be nicer. The shul from Baltimore and many others who spoke with me. So I had the greatest pleasure of visiting them, and it was so great to meet some of your followers in real life. That was just amazing.
Or you're coming back from the US using the word shul. I don't know if you would have said that word
I
prior
wouldn't.
to your travel, but you've
Probably
picked
not.
some things up on the way. Okay, so let's jump into that for a second. You had a lot of meetings in Washington, D.C. What can you say your top three points were for policymakers, for think tanks in D.C. with regards to this war?
Yeah, look, so first of all, I had the greatest time to meet with many of your followers over there in DC, Baltimore, other places. And yeah, I did meet with some officials there and mostly think tanks and the whole DC world, I would say, in general. I would say this. Israelis sometimes come to the US and they talk about sort of local issues. And I think IDSF with Amir Avivi and others who come over to the US and in my recent trip, what we try to highlight is that we're not talking about Israelis who are coming to the US and asking for favors, sort of begging for help or something, or sort of focusing on their own little local issue. The way it's perceived in the US, you guys know it better than anyone, is how that can promote the United States interest in the region and around the world. How will sort of helping you guys, quote unquote, help us? And I think it's a fair question, especially in the current climate day and age where, the Trump administration focuses mostly on what will benefit the US as opposed to what will benefit the Western world, all the world in general terms. That's why the Paris Climate Accord was regarded this way. That's why they take such a hard stance against immigration and all that. And I can see why, and I understand that. And I think Israel's greatest added value is that it's in good terms with, like, across the aisle with both parties. It's a bipartisan issue, and always will be, the security of Israel. But it's not just the security of Israel per se. It's how to promote the U.S. homeland security. And to that, yes, the United States has always been a bit isolationist in a way. It has always sort of looked internally, and that's okay. I guess all countries do. But I think what makes the United States stand out of all other countries, it's a superpower unlike any other country, and it has vast interests around the world. And acting or promoting American interests in the Middle East will greatly benefit the United States homeland security and the safety of Americans at home. Just as an example, taking on the Iranian challenge, the Iranian threat head on, will not just resolve some sort of a petty local issue, it will ensure that American forces are free to navigate around the seas, especially in the Persian Gulf and Bab el-Mandeb, the Red Sea, ensure the free flow of trade through the seas. It will open up new trade routes between Israel and the Arab world, make oil prices plummet. All these things are within reach. And so that's my main point, the main point that I was trying to make in the US. I have to tell you, I was very encouraged because it seems like Israel and the United States view a lot of things eye to eye.
Wonderful. When you kind of look at the shared values and the strategic goals that line up between Israel and the U.S., let's focus on Iran for a second,
Right.
because when you go to the U.S., you talk about how Iran is a shared enemy of both countries. There was recently a report that the foreign minister of Iran noted that Iran wants to build nuclear reactors, and that's a business prospect for potential contractors in the US, meaning the US should embrace Iran's
Right.
nuclear program because it will bring business and it'll help the US economy. How do you combat that type of presentation?
Look, they're good. They're very good. They're trying to sort of dictate the narrative, and I think we shouldn't fall into this trap. Iran is an arch enemy of the United States. It will try to sweet talk Americans with all sorts of words they want to hear about business and all that. The truth of the matter is that Iran is part of the Russia-China whole axis of evil, and it is in cahoots with them when it comes to undermining stability in the Middle East. It will try to sweet talk the United States into trying to make all sorts of concessions. I'm just reminded of what the spokeswoman for the Iranian government said just today, that we are actually having the first narrative. And when news outlets around the world want to understand what's going on in terms of negotiations between the U.S. and Iran, be it in Oman or in Rome or elsewhere, they first come to us. I don't know if that's true, but it shows that they are trying to sort of, as Iranian opposition media called it, manage the narrative and sort of to have the first word. And I think that's really what we should what we should beware of. Let's see, then namely that Iran is behaving more smartly this time around. The supreme leader said it will be a mistake to repeat we should not repeat the mistakes of the 2015 deal, and this time around we come more prepared and so on. I think neither the Trump administration nor Israel nor the people in the U.S. and Israel have any illusions as to what Iran's true intention is to destroy Israel and then take on the United States. And this is not as grave a threat as Russia and China, and therefore, but it is a serious and dire threat on Israel and the United States. And what I mean by that is that taking on Iran would be far easier and far less complicated than Russia and China. I think that's what we should be focusing on.
Now, there's certainly limitations on what you can share with us, but in terms of looking at the Iranian nuclear program and just objectively classifying it as a program for the purpose of military nuclear program versus peaceful reactors, is there ambiguity in this space in terms of really assessing what Iran is up to?
No, and I think if you look at dozens of countries around the world who have peaceful nuclear programs, none of them is doing what Iran is doing. And there's no, you don't need to look any further than media reports and professional reports such as the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the U.S. Director of National Intelligence. All of these reports, think tanks that publish these reports and analyze what they found out about Iran's nuclear program. Look, Iran has been doing activities for a while now, enriching to a level of 60%. Its stockpile of uranium or trying to obtain uranium metal and sort of digging underground facilities like the ISIS think tank published and all sorts of agencies published in news media around the world. What the steps that they have been taking are anything but a peaceful program. It's a program designated to make Iran a nuclear state, and that is at loggerheads with the U.S. national security interests, and that's really what it all comes down to: a fanatic dictatorial regime who is attempting to develop nuclear weapons and sort of oversize its influence in the Middle East. It will be harder for the U.S. to do business in the Middle East with Saudi Arabia, with Israel, with anyone, when there is an Iranian shadow hovering over these attempts. And so it will be really narrow down the sort of sphere of influence and the interest of the U.S. in the Middle East in a way that will seriously affect also prices and security at home. This is really what it all comes down to thwart a threat, an imminent, clear, present danger to the United States and Israel and countries around the region.
Thank you so much, Or. Before we continue, I just want to remind all of our wonderful subscribers and viewers to make sure, if you're not a subscriber, to subscribe. If you are a subscriber, to like this video when it's out on YouTube, to share it. It really helps us spread the word, tell the world the truth about what is happening in Israel and what Israel and the West need to be safe and secure. Or you recently, with the IDSF Research Department, put out a very important paper about Israel's national security doctrine, which is evolving and needs to evolve. What can you share with us about that?
Right. So if there's anything we learned from October 7, and actually from 9/11 as well, is that when you overlook basic principles of national security, you are doomed to fail, and you open up and really are putting yourself in harm's way to dangers emanating from enemies who want to destroy you. And so October 7 really was a textbook example for this. How the state of Israel, with all its investment in security and all of our civilian soldier model and the People's Army model and everything we learned all these years, sort of neglected some of these security principles. So in the morning of October 7, there was some sort of an intelligence alert, as we learned from public reports, but then nothing much was done about it. There were no sufficiently equipped civilians in homes around the Otef, the Gaza envelope region, and we know how armed civilians really helped mitigate and deal with sometimes swarms of dozens of terrorists who simply stormed their homes, and they could handle them very, with against all odds, but one armed with a personal gun against dozens of them, and so it changed the whole picture. We're talking about IDF units that were not sufficiently prepared, or the Air Force. All these things should be looked into, but the point is that not just the morning of October 7, more broadly, how Israel and sometimes across the Western world, we sort of fell asleep. And this was a gigantic wake-up call. We didn't handle the wider problem for years. Dismantled some of the land forces, the land army of Israel, out of thinking that all challenges are now like within reach of our Air Force, and so proxy armies of Iran had the chance to metastasize in Gaza and in Lebanon, really encircling Israel with sort of with this choke string of proxy armies on our borders, not the distance between the United States and Afghanistan, but really within 200 feet from the nearest Israeli home. And we sort of let it happen. And I think that's a big lesson from October 7. You should not neglect these basic principles, fundamental principles. You should not have any proxy armies, any terrorist groups, any terrorists on your borders, especially not of this magnitude. If there's emanating threats, you should act, actively initiate to thwart them. And this is something that we neglected over the years.
And or you yourself come from the intelligence community. Do you think the national security agenda of Israel moving forward has to have a different approach to the role of military intelligence and how it informs the state of the operations? Meaning, should things be more values driven or perhaps more aggressive and rely less on intelligence?
Look, Israeli intelligence works great. I think the problem was in the interpretation level, and we all saw how, you can always, have all the flag posts in the world, and people sort of lit the pit hole with a flashlight for you, with a projector, like, please don't fall in the pit hole, and you still fall because you don't believe it's a real danger. I think that was mainly the problem with interpretation, and that really teaches us a lesson. I think, all IDF soldiers are great. They're doing an amazing job. And the main problem, I think, of us as a society, we refuse to see all the little signs, all the massive, massive alert signs that were over there. And if anything, that teaches us that one cannot go back to October 6th. One cannot go back to square one. It's very tempting. It's very easy. Like you mentioned at the beginning, we should have a ceasefire. Let's go back and so on. We have a sacred duty to rescue all hostages, to bring them home. We have a sacred duty, and I'm frankly shocked that it's taking so much time to do it. And I'm really, this is the most urgent mission that we have, to bring them home. This is not at loggerheads with with the other main objective of the war, of the three, which is destroying Hamas. Free the hostages, destroy Hamas, and then move on to change the reality in Gaza, remove the threat. That's what it's all about.
Or we're going to go to a question from our viewers. And an important question is, how do you respond to those voices who claim that a direct attack on Iran's nuclear program would in fact trigger a much broader conflict, would trigger a World War III, as
Mm.
opposed to de-escalating the Middle East, things would go spiral out of control?
Right, so that's a very fair question. And I think if we talked 2 years ago, I would say, well, there's a fair chance that the Middle East conflict will spin out of control, and that would be like to sort of awaken the beast. We're past that bridge already. I mean, we're at the point where Iran's main pathways to respond, retaliate on Israel and across the Middle East have been significantly diminished. Iran is today, yeah, it's more dangerous than ever before with all this advanced uranium enrichment, but it's also weaker than ever before. And you can see how Hamas in Gaza is significantly diminished, how Hezbollah is basically decimated, how the Houthis are being dealt with by the US, the Assad regime fell, and if reports are to be believed, then the IDF strike in Iran in October, some reports claim that it affected their air defenses. I think even Mike Waltz said it in one of his interviews. So basically, Iran is weakened, and I think if we look at this data, for our eyes, we can deduce that yes, Iran may respond. We can't tell how, but Iran already tried to attack Israel twice, and it failed with the amazing air defense systems in Israel, the United States military that participated in intercepting these threats. And I can safely assume that Iran will have a very clear message from Israel and the United States. It should not overreact to such a military action, because otherwise they're doomed. That's what at least the message I hope will come across. And look, I mean, I don't think anybody's eager to do that, but it's becoming clear that it's basically the only way to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. The Trump administration is doing what it needs to do. It is offering a fig leaf and reaching out their hand, saying, we are offering you the good path to, it's either the good way or the bad way. The good way would be negotiate and dismantle your nuclear program. The bad way is to refuse to reach a conclusion, and then you'll have a preemptive, limited military strike to remove the threat. I would argue that it would end the war, not open up a new one, because we already are deep into a war for a year and a half, initiated by Iran. And to close up this chapter and open up a new age of peace and stability in the Middle East, one has to remove the threat.
Thank you so much, or very much appreciate all of your deep insight. I know our viewers do as well. I think we're going to end the briefing right now. You have shared a tremendous amount with us. Always very much appreciated. And I, of course, want to thank all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. Again, if you enjoy this content, if it's educational and it helps you understand what's happening in the Middle East, please like and subscribe our channel. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.